because we want the oil, because that oil belongs to the United States. He never explained how exactly the United States would own the natural resources of a foreign country. Trump, at that moment, revealed that the motive was taking something that we wanted. And that's not acceptable. And here was the president saying, we're just stealing this because we can. You want to be or not. And it's at that point that a lot of people should have spoken up and said, I'm out. Not that I hate Trump or don't like his entire program. Lots of things about it I love. I'm grateful. I'd maybe vote for him again, but I can't support theft because it's immoral. If you didn't believe it was real, why would you care? You'd put on the costume and take it off. It doesn't matter. That suggests you know it is real and you're rejecting it intentionally. You know what you're doing and you're doing it anyway.
Okay, so this one's heavy, like genuinely heavy. Tucker Carlson. Yeah, that Tucker Carlson just did something I honestly did not expect. He looked directly at his own audience, the MAGA base that's been ride or die for Trump since day one, and told them they need to reconsider their support. Not over some culture war nonsense, not over mean tweets, over something way more serious. Straight up imperial theft. We're talking about Trump admitting on camera that we invaded Venezuela to take their oil. Just said it out loud. And Tucker's calling it what it is, a crime. And he's saying if you're a Christian who claims to care about biblical law and morality, you can't just ignore this. So buckle up, because this is Tucker Carlson holding his own side accountable in a way you almost never see anymore. Let's get into it.
Millions of American Christians voted for Donald Trump when he ran for president in the last election, and millions more Christians around the world rooted for him to win. Many still do root for Donald Trump. Now, why is that? Because of his personal piety? Well, of course not. Trump, to his credit, has never claimed to be personally pious, especially religious in any sense. They voted for him and they still support him because he seemed like a protector. He seemed like someone who might save them from the growing and highly aggressive agnosticism, if not atheism, of, say, the technology class or the bureaucratic class, godless nations of other religions that oppose us. Donald Trump seemed like someone who would protect Christians from that, who was committed to the free exercise of religion in this country and who was also committed to ending abortion. Whether or not he himself opposed abortion, whether he was pro-life in any meaningful sense, didn't seem to matter. He would appoint justices that opposed abortion, that thought Roe v. Wade was unconstitutional. He did that. And that he would basically carry the flag for their issues, and that he was sympathetic to them. And they support him on that basis. Can they still support him? That's the question. And that's a question Christians should have begun to ask themselves on January 4th of this year. And that was the day that the president announced the arrest of the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, who was, no question, an anti-American leader and a socialist, not someone most Americans liked or really had cause to like. So the problem was not necessarily that Trump was against an anti-American leader. In fact, that was a benefit in the eyes of most of his voters. The problem was why we did it and why the president told us he did it. And that was for the oil. So in the days before that operation in early January, the president tweeted out, sent out on his Truth Social account, and also said in public, we're doing this because we want the oil, because that oil belongs to the United States. He never explained how exactly the United States would own the natural resources of a foreign country. Apparently, American oil companies helped develop the oil fields in Venezuela. Therefore, we own the oil. That was the idea, and they stole it from us. But there was no real effort to explain how that works, how that makes any sense at all. Instead, you had the president of the United States say, we need the oil. Oil's really important. True and true. Therefore, we're going to take it. And therefore, apparently, we did. In the days after that operation, the successful removal of the president of the country and the installation of his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, as president, our president, Donald Trump, held a widely publicized on-camera meeting with the heads of American oil companies and talk through how we're going to split up the natural resources of Venezuela and why this is great for America. So why should Christians have paused at exactly that moment and asked, can I still support this? Is this what I voted for? Is this what I want? Is this acceptable? And the reason is really simple, because Trump at that moment revealed that the motive was taking something that we wanted. And that's not acceptable for Christians. In fact, that's not acceptable for Americans or any civilized people, because taking other people's stuff by force cannot be allowed. In fact, preventing that is the basis of our legal code. If there's one thing that every person knows, that is, in a civilized country, you can't steal without penalty. It's not allowed. That doesn't belong to you. You can't shoplift. You can't rob banks. You can't embezzle. You can't invade countries to steal their stuff, because they're all varieties of the same theme, which is theft. And theft is wrong. It's wrong under the American legal code, but it's also wrong under the Christian legal code. Theft is wrong. Spelled out really clearly. It's also intuitive. And here was the president saying, we're just stealing this because we can. Well, as a practical matter,
dude, do you understand what just happened in that section? Tucker just walked his audience through the entire Venezuela operation, step by step. And he's not framing it as some liberation mission or freedom thing. He's calling it theft. He's saying Trump literally told us on Truth Social and in public statements that we're invading Venezuela because we want their oil. Because American oil companies helped develop those fields decades ago, so apparently now it belongs to us forever. That's the logic. And then, and this is the part that's absolutely wild, Trump held a televised meeting with American oil execs to divvy up Venezuela's natural resources like it's a mob movie, like they're sitting around a table cutting up a pie. And Tucker's point here is so sharp, man. He's not even arguing whether Maduro was a bad guy. He's not defending socialism. He's saying the why matters. The motive matters. Because if the United States can just say, we want that, so we're taking it, what's stopping China from doing the same thing to us? What's stopping Russia? What's stopping any stronger power from looking at our stuff and going, cool, we'll take that now? You set that standard, you live by that standard. That's how international law works. That's how any law works. And here's where Tucker's really threading the needle. He's talking directly to Christians. He's saying, look, you guys voted for Trump because you thought he'd protect religious freedom, stack the courts with pro-life judges, push back against the godless bureaucratic class. Fine, he did some of that. But can you really support a guy who just openly admitted to theft? Not alleged theft, not conspiracy theory theft. He said it on camera. We did this for the oil. Tucker's asking, where's the line? At what point do you say, I'm out? And I gotta say, Tucker calling this out took guts, because his audience is overwhelmingly pro-Trump. These are people who've been told for years that Trump is fighting the deep state, draining the swamp, standing up for the little guy. And Tucker's standing there going, yeah, but he just confessed to stealing another country's resources on live TV, so maybe we need to pump the brakes. That's not easy. That's not playing to the crowd. That's holding your own side accountable, which almost nobody does anymore. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Trump actually believes this oil belongs to the US? Or does he just not care because he knows he can get away with it?
Thing to say out loud, given that we know from history that the things you do will be done unto you. Once you set a standard, you will have to live by that standard. Write a law, you will be judged by that law. So if the new law is, I can take it because I want it, and I have more power than you, at some point, we can rest assured the tables will be turned, and the things that we want and cherish and have earned and that we own will be taken from us by force at the moment when some other power has more force than we do. It's really simple. It's sometimes called the law of the jungle. And it may be the law of nature, but people don't want to live under that law because it is a brutal and unforgiving law. So they create higher laws, or they appeal to the highest law of all, which is God's law, which prohibits that. So this was a profound moment in American history, probably in the history of the modern world, where the most powerful nation said, if we want it, we'll take it. No one's ever said that before. Now, they've done it under the guise of ideology. They've made up stories to hide the fact they're doing it. But to say you're doing it implicates everybody else in the crime. You can't say you didn't know. Your president just told you on television, we took out their president because we want his oil. And at that point, you're an accessory to the crime, whether you want to be or not. And it's at that point that a lot of people should have spoken up and said, I'm out. Not that I hate Trump or don't like his entire program. Lots of things about it I love. I'm grateful. I'd maybe vote for him again, but I can't support theft because it's immoral. But they didn't. Maybe some did, but certainly the leaders of the American Christian churches, by and large, said absolutely nothing. And maybe because they said nothing, this accelerated. These are the same people who sort of didn't notice somehow that on Inauguration Day, the president did not take his oath of office with his hand on the Bible. His wife stood next to him holding it. I was about 15 feet away and saw it, but he did not put his hand on the Bible. And that should have been maybe a clue that we need to pause and think about, what is this? Why wouldn't you put your hand on the Bible? If you don't believe in the Bible, you think it's just a book, there's no cost to you to putting your hand on it, just kind of following the protocol, going along with the tradition. All presidents do it. Why aren't you doing it? And you're not doing it intentionally. You're choosing not to put your hand on the Bible when you take that oath. That suggests not that you don't believe it's real, because if you didn't believe it was real, why would you care? You'd put on the costume and take it off. It doesn't matter. That suggests you know it is real and you're rejecting it intentionally. You know what you're doing and you're doing it anyway. But nobody asked questions about that either. It seemed kind of inappropriate, given the celebration then in progress, to ask, why wouldn't you put your hand on the Bible when you take the oath of office to lead our nation? But pretty much nobody did. I didn't. I'll admit that. I saw it and didn't say one word. Bothered me ever since. But right around January 4th, it became clear that maybe he didn't put his hand on the Bible because he affirmatively rejects what's inside that book. And what's inside that book are limits on human behavior. Because if there's one theme that spans all 66 books in the Christian Bible, it's that you are not God. And you cannot assume his powers. Because you don't have them. You may convince yourself you have them. You may want them. You may have been promised them. But in the end, they're not yours. And you'll never have them. And you can only destroy yourself and the people around you by pretending that you do. That is the consistent message that spans from Genesis to Revelation. And people who ignore that law are punished. Just like people who ignore gravity or freezing temperatures are punished. Because these are laws that...
So here's my verdict on this whole thing. Tucker Carlson absolutely crushed this. Like, this is one of the most morally serious critiques of Trump I've seen from someone who's traditionally been in his corner. And what makes it so effective is that Tucker's not coming at this from a liberal angle. He's not talking about norms or decorum or whatever MSNBC would clutch their pearls over. He's talking about theft. He's talking about biblical law. He's talking about the kind of imperial overreach that Christians should fundamentally oppose if they actually believe what they say they believe. And the stuff about Inauguration Day, the fact that Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible when he took the oath, dude, I didn't even notice that, but Tucker did. And he's been sitting on it, feeling uncomfortable about it, and now he's connecting the dots. He's saying, look, if you intentionally refuse to touch the Bible during your oath of office, that's not an accident. That's not, oh, I forgot. That's a statement. That's you saying, I know what's in this book, and I reject it. Because if you didn't believe it was real, you'd just go through the motions. You'd put your hand on it, smile for the camera, and move on. But refusing to touch it, that's active rejection. And Tucker's tying this all together. The Venezuela invasion, the oil grab, the refusal to acknowledge biblical limits on power, into this broader theme. Trump is acting like he's above the law, not just American law, God's law. The idea that you can't just take what you want because you're stronger. The idea that there are consequences for your actions. The idea that you are not God. And Tucker's saying, if Christian leaders don't speak up about this, they're complicit. They're accessories to the crime. Now here's the thing. I don't think Tucker's trying to destroy Trump. I think he's trying to save the Christian right from completely compromising its moral foundation. Because once you say it's okay to steal if our guy does it, you've lost the plot. You can't claim the moral high ground on abortion, religious freedom, family values, any of it, if you're cool with your president openly bragging about imperial theft. The hypocrisy becomes too obvious, even for people who want to believe. And the silence from Christian leaders on this? Deafening. Tucker calls it out directly. These are the people who should have been first in line to say, hold on, this is wrong. But they didn't. And Tucker's theory, which I think is probably right, is that once Trump openly said, we did this for the oil, it accelerated. It gave permission for the next thing and the next thing. Because if nobody stops you at theft, why would you stop yourself at anything else? This is what accountability looks like, guys. This is someone who's been pro-Trump, who's defended Trump, who probably still agrees with Trump on a bunch of stuff, holding the line on something that actually matters. Not some petty Twitter beef. Actual moral law. Actual biblical principles. Actual don't steal other countries' stuff basics. So that's where I'm at. Tucker won this, not because he destroyed some lib in a debate, because he had the guts to tell his own audience something they didn't want to hear. And he did it without hedging, without softening it, without playing both sides. He just said it. This is theft, and theft is wrong. And if you support this, you're complicit. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Can Christian Trump supporters reconcile this? Or is Tucker right that this should have been the moment they stepped back? Welcome to MB. Stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.